Hi, my name is Emma Murphy, and today I'm going to be discussing my disability research guide on visual impairments. So before we begin talking about visual impairments, it's really important to define what it is. So this is the definition from IDEA, which was originally enacted in 1975. It's a piece of legislation regarding special education. So IDEA defines visual impairment as being visual impairment, including blindness, means an impairment in vision that, even with correction, adversely affects a child's educational performance. The term includes both partial sight and blindness. And there are a lot of different types of visual impairments, including being cross-eyed or having certain glaucoma issues, things like that. And there are 3 different levels of function within visual impairments. Low vision being functionally blind and being totally blind. And low vision means that you have some vision loss, but you use vision as your main sensory output. Being functionally blind means that you have vision loss and you can really only use vision for functional tasks, like brushing your teeth, brushing your hair, getting dressed in the morning, crossing the street. But for educational purposes, you have to rely on your other senses. And being totally blind means that you cannot see at all and you have to use other senses during every part of the day, whether it's used for functional tasks or for educational purposes. When you have a visual impairment, there are going to be certain characteristics, whether that be social, emotional, physical, or cognitive, that will be a little bit different from someone who is sighted. So some of the social characteristics that you will see in someone who has visual impairments are, delayed social cues, and because of this, feelings of isolation and being uninformed. So a lot of the times people who have low vision or are totally blind can't see and therefore can't comprehend and understand certain body language or facial cues. So because of this, they can, miss out on sarcasm or jokes and just feel really isolated from their peers. For emotional characteristics, when you're a baby, when you're first born, oftentimes people with visual impairments have a delayed concept of self because they cannot look into the mother's eyes and understand that they are, separate entities. For physical characteristics, a lot of the times people with visual impairments are cross-eyed, they're really clumsy, have very poor hand-eye coordination, and it's just very difficult to, kind of hone in on that coordination because you cannot see in front of you and you cannot have spatial awareness because of it. And lastly, for cognitive, there is a lack of object permanence, and there's also a delayed language development. Like I was saying before with social cues, sometimes it's really difficult for students with visual impairments to understand sarcasm or even, basic language skills, being able to listen for long periods of time, things like that. Some of the strengths and challenges, of people with visual impairments. I learned a lot of this from the book that I read entitled A Stolen Light by Ved Mehta, which is about a college student in the 1970s. It's not a biography, discussing the main character's visual impairment and learning how to, live on one's own and kind of become an adult while also being blind. So some of the strengths that people with visual impairments have are they're very independent. They can, adapt to things and they can learn how to do things independently. And they also have heightened senses besides sight. So, it's often said that people with visual impairments, people who are blind, have a really heightened sense of hearing, heightened sense of smell. It's because they really rely on this thing. So in the book, The Stolen Light, the main character relied a lot on sight, hearing when he was crossing the street. So he would listen and try and see if there was a car coming, and if he could not hear a car, or if he heard a car but it was far away, he knew that it would be safe to cross. I think one of the main challenges that people with visual impairments face in daily life is stigma. A lot of people are quite unaware of this disability. They don't really know what goes on. They don't know the science behind it. They don't know the cognitive issues behind it. They don't know the social aspect of it. And it's just really difficult to integrate into a regular school environment. I think that a lot of the times people without the disability try to tell people with visual impairments how they should be living, what's best for them. And I think this is really frustrating, and it's something that's ongoing in life. So here are 3 accommodations for students with visual impairments. So if you have a student with low vision or functional blindness, you definitely should have them sit in the front of the classroom or any kind of preferential seating that would help them best, so they would be able to actually see and they wouldn't have to take a lot of energy just to focus on what's on the board. Another thing is keeping furniture in consistent locations. This is especially true if you have a student who is totally blind. So if you are constantly moving the furniture around, or moving the desk clumps, or you're moving from clump to just straight lines, then that can be really dangerous for the student because they are so used to having the furniture in one spot that when they come into the classroom and feel by bumping into things that things are different, it could be very dangerous. It's a big safety hazard. The third one is to always use both verbal and physical cues. So, for example, a lot of times, personally, I will point at something rather than saying it's over there. But, if I had a student in my classroom with visual impairment, I would point, but I would also say the water bottle is on that table. So just things like that can make the classroom a lot more accessible to people with visual impairments. And lastly, some really great resources for future educators when dealing with students who have a visual impairment. Obviously, the American Foundation for the Blind, the National Association for Special Educators, Perkins School for the Blind, teachers of students with visual impairments, and also any student with this disability. It's very helpful to talk to a student who has lived through this, who knows the system and knows what their strengths and weaknesses are, knows how teachers can make classrooms more accessible, and their parents too, because their parents also have a lot of really great insights as well.